There we go.
Oh God, I'm really not with it. I've been trying to do 2,000 things. I'm having a wassail tomorrow and I'm trying to heat up, getting cider ingredients and finding things, um, finding a poem and all that sort of thing. So I've been doing that, dashing about doing that and forgetting to be ready for this too. So I'm sorry about that, folks. My mind has been elsewhere. Anyway, welcome, Sarah. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Sarah's our speaker for this evening. And she's given me a wee biographical bit that she's a plant ecologist with strong focus on upland vegetation, restoration, I know, restoration zoology and applied science. And she has worked previously for the National Trust in the Ben Lawers estate and studying the Arctic alpines, which I've yet to go and see. But currently, and why she's speaking tonight, is she working at on the Corrour Estate as a conservation manager, looking at trying to encourage the recovery of the natural environment on that estate, which if people don't know where it is, it's in Lochaber. It kind of borders onto the Ranach Moor. Maybe it's even part of it is Ranach Moor. And she's also studying for a PhD using presumably information you're getting from your current employment and other employments. So thank you for coming along tonight. And format is over to you. And at the end of it, we'll have time for people to comment or ask questions, if that's okay.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. If there's any technical problems, just interrupt me, but otherwise I'll just proceed. Right, here we go. Sharing my screen. Oh gosh. Right, it always looks different every time you do this. Right. I've now put that to my screen, full screen. So hopefully everyone can see that.
Yeah,
Great stuff.
that's fine.
Super. Well, thanks for inviting me along today. It's really nice to talk to a group such as yourselves with lots of interest in the environment and an estate and what we're doing to hopefully enhance the ecology. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Corrour and what we do. Obviously, focusing on the environment because that's my job. I'm the conservation manager, but I'm also going to kind of populate the talk with some examples of some of the really interesting botany and other species that we've got because I know that'll be of particular interest to yourselves. So just well, it's been a very nice introduction to me, but just this slide is another way of doing that. So yeah, I am conservation manager at Corrour. I've been at Corrour for like 4 years now. Seems to have gone very quick. Before that was with the National Trust for Scotland at Ben Lawers as an ecologist. And I'm working part-time at Corrour 3 days a week because the rest of the time I'm doing my PhD at University of Stirling, which is on mountain woodland restoration. So there's going to be a bit of an allusion to that in the talk because it's I'm very passionate about that topic. And I'm also chair of the Mountain Woodland Action Group, which has been operating for nearly 30 years now. So I've been chair for about 3.5. Very exciting to advocate for mountain woodlands. But in general, I'm just really excited about plants in particular and upland plants at that. But Corrour has been quite a good opportunity to get to grips with other species groups as well, not just plants, but I feel like working at Ben Lawers really cemented botany as my main interest because that's such a wonderful place for Arctic alpine plants. But we're talking about Corrour today. So yeah, it's a private estate in Lochaber, in kind of eastern Lochaber. But it's yeah, it is on Ranach Moor. Kind of got about a quarter of the estate or so is in Ranach Moor. So we're east of Ben Nevis and Fort William, and bounded by the Blackwater Reservoir in the south, and then Glenspian in the north. And the estate is in total 23,000 hectares inside, with Loch Ossian in the middle, and perhaps most famous for Corrour Station on the West Highland Line. It's always nice to have a few slides about what the estate does more broadly than just the environmental work. So I mentioned the station. It's kind of the visitor gateway to the estate because there's no public access roads on the estate. And we're very popular. There's about 30,000 or so visitors a year, maybe more. That's just the recorded through the ticket sales on the train. And it's very popular with Munro baggers and people using the station restaurant, which operates from or about March till November every year with about 7 members of staff. It's a really popular hive of activity at the kind of heart of the estate. Really lovely place to have dinner. And we also have a cottages, self-catering cottages businesses, although previously we did have, about 8 cottages operating with 50 beds, but that's been reduced down to just 2 now with 14 beds because as we're expanding our team, there's a greater need for staff accommodation and for other visiting groups and contractors and things and researchers. So we've had to prioritize that over the holiday lets, but we still do operate them on a smaller scale. And the bottom 2 pictures are a nod to our hydroelectric schemes. We've got 4 run-of-river schemes. So they're not using large-scale water storage. It's all extracting from the river, but making sure there's always a flow of the river. With about, 5.25 megawatts of installed capacity across these 4 schemes, which I'm told is enough power for 3,000 homes. And we are a sustainable business, so we've decarbonised everything, decarbonised our heating, switched over from oil to electricity, which is powered, of course, by the hydro. And these are Corrour's goals as a business and private estate. So I mentioned being carbon negative. And research is very important to us, particularly of ecology, to inform our management. There'll be more about that later. A key one there is right in the middle, enhance employment at Corrour. So this is something that's really important to us to demonstrate that shifting to an environmental focus estate actually has benefits for employment rather than leading to job losses, which some people fear might be the case. It's the complete opposite. There's so much to do, as you'll see. And we're trying to expand our collaboration with local communities and communities of interest as well, which includes all the people that come to the estate as visitors via the railway. And hopefully we can create a wonderful, inspiring experience for our visitors. And we do hold like tours as well for various groups throughout the year. And this is the mission to be a leading example of landscape scale ecological restoration through nature recovery and encouraging natural processes to return and flourish. So yeah, very much environmental focused nature recovery. But Corrour wasn't always like that. So when the current owners bought it in 1995, it was very much a sort of traditional sporting estate with very high deer densities. I would say that in that respect, it's actually pretty representative of a lot of upland Scotland in terms of its sort of management history, its cultural history, and then also its environment. So we're very upland. We've got most of the estate is above 400 meters altitude, a quarter's above 600 meters. We've got various Munros across the estate. And our habitats are sort of classic. Well, blanket bog is over a third because we're on the edge of Rannoch Moor. Also wet heaths and acid grasslands, but there is actually quite a variety of specialist upland communities as well, calcareous grasslands and snow beds, which are very exciting from a botanical point of view. So it's a very exciting place to work because it's got lots of gems and interesting discoveries that we've made. But I think what we're doing in terms of our management is something that could be applied much more widely to Scotland. Before I launch into what we're actually doing at Corrour, just to whet your appetite, so to speak, here's a side of some of our key botanical highlights. In the top left, there's Lycopodium legopus, hare's foot club moss, which is, I guess, in terms of dots on the map, like in terms of dots on the BSBI plant atlas, I think this is the vascular plant with the fewest dots across the whole country that we have on Corrour. So it's pretty exciting and very special to have that. And I think it might be the furthest west site as well in Scotland. And we're very famous for small cowrie, Melanpyrum sylvaticum. We've got a very robust population of that on Loch Lothian. And of course, Rannoch Rush on the bottom right there, that's we have a few sites for that, and actually more still being discovered even last year by one of our contractors, Gus Routledge. So it's nice to have that. And then Baldelia repens, creeping water plantain, which is only occurs on the Loch Lothian catchment and the Tay catchment in Scotland, which is very lovely semi-aquatic plant. But I think one of the strangest vascular plants that we have, if not the strangest, is the coral necklace, which occurs on Loch Traig, and we only found this in, I think, 2021, the summer after I started in the job. I got a message from one of my colleagues, our head stalker actually, who does know his botany really well, and he said, I found this plant and I don't know what it is, I've never seen it before, and I nearly dropped my phone. I'd never seen it before, but I knew what it was. And this, if you know it, it only occurs in Cornwall and the New Forest in Britain, and it's nationally rare. But now, for some reason, it's at Corrour. So it's the only place in Scotland, as far as I know, that it occurs. But it occurs in exceptional abundance on the side of Loch Traig in the drawdown zone. I sent the pictures to David Pearman, who knows a lot about this plant, and he said he's never seen anything like this. It's by far the largest extent in Britain. So very odd. We don't know how it's got here, but it seems to be thriving. So very, very interesting plant. So yeah, it just goes to show there's very interesting things to be found on Corrour. But of course, it's not just about plants. So this slide is a nod to that. I suppose if I had to pick one bird to focus on, it would be black grouse, who are thriving at the moment in response to our habitat restoration work. Rannoch brindle beauty, we've got plenty of that, of course, on Rannoch Moor. It's lovely to see that moth. And our raptors are doing well. In fact, in the last couple of years, we've had some golden eagle chicks fledge, which is a really nice sort of success story from this wonderful top predator. So moving back to the management now. So as I mentioned previously, Corrour was a traditional sporting estate, but when the current owners took it over, the focus was realigned to landscape scale ecological restoration through nature recovery and primarily natural regeneration of woodlands, but also recovery of peatland habitats as well. And the primary method that we're using to achieve this is by reducing the grazing pressure right down to a level that's hopefully low enough to encourage the regeneration. So primarily doing this all without fencing. We don't have any sheep on Corrour now, so this is all very much about the deer and red deer in particular. So this chart kind of shows the journey that we've been on from, well, about 17 deer per square kilometre in 2006, which is kind of standard for a sporting estate, if not slightly low, actually, in terms of some of the numbers that they have, but very high still, and in terms of what we have today, which in the last helicopter count was down to 0.8 per square kilometre, which is very low in the Scottish context, although I will state, of course, that's a snapshot in time, so populations fluctuate, and there's changes in animals through migration as well. So we think probably we're operating about 3 per square kilometre at the moment. And people always ask me about the funny spike in this graph in 2017. So the squares there, they're helicopter counts, so they're as accurate as we can do, like an actual count of animals. And in the interim years were done with a population model from SNH at the time, which was developed on RUM, so doesn't really account for migration when you've got low numbers of deer in an estate that's surrounded by other estates with very high densities of deer. So I think we thought in 2017 that we actually had a lower density than the helicopter count came back with, which was a bit of an incentive to step up and get things down to where they are today. But I think it's important to say, though, that like deer, we don't perceive them to be the enemy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like they're a really important part of our cultural heritage. I mean, it's the logo of Corrour is a deer, right? So they're fantastic animals, and it's something that we cherish. And in fact, grazing is a really important ecological process, and all sorts of weird things happen if you completely remove the large herbivores. And you might lose some of the diversity, particularly in the smaller plants. So it's just about trying to find a balance, really, between this like sustainable, healthy deer population that will also enable us to have regeneration of trees, which are vulnerable to overgrazing. So yeah, trying to find a balance, doing this with our deer rather than without them. Which is a very exciting, interesting journey to be on. This map here of woodland potential shows what we might be able to achieve at Corrour. It's very, very broad brush, but basically there was an NVC survey done in 2018, mapped all the habitats across the estate and different polygons. Using that and the soil classifications, then we were able to project very broadly potential woodland types across Corrour. So in the dark green, there's over 2,000 hectares of continuous cover woodland, particularly down at Loch Traig, where there's really fertile soils. And it's been calculated if we were to reforest that with regeneration, we could sequester 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. So that's very, very exciting. But I'm also really interested actually in all the rest of the polygons, the scattered woodland, the discontinuous woodland. So this is more like either small groups of dense trees across in the landscape or sparsely scattered trees. Really depends on the soil types, and obviously you would expect plenty of open ground in these areas where trees shouldn't really be growing, particularly in the peatlands and the wet heaths and things. So I think that shows that actually we could support kind of really wonderful mosaic with trees and also plenty of open ground, and obviously plenty of blanket bog on Rannoch Moor where there shouldn't be trees at all. So it's a very structurally varied, exciting landscape. But that's why natural regeneration is really important rather than tree planting, because if we were to, we shouldn't be planting lots of this with dense forestry, because this map shows that it shouldn't support dense woodland. So if natural regeneration takes the lead, then the trees will grow in the best places for them. And we've got plenty of monitoring data to show that this is gradually happening on the open hill, and also photos and observations to back that up. So it's mostly birch and rowan and willow. We don't have any native pine on Corrour. Any pine that we do have has been planted. So it's very much about the broadleaves, and they're regenerating across the hill at various altitudes. I like the picture here actually at the bottom left. It's actually, this was taken in my first summer, so I should go back and retake it because they might have come on a bit now. But this is maybe about 450 meters altitude, so sort of fairly high up for regen to get away quickly, but it's really exciting walking up through there. This is down near Furset, and sort of seeing this like ankle high forest coming up in response to reduction in grazing. And the data from some of our longer running Transect shows increasing densities of seedlings, 4,000, nearly 5,000, which is really encouraging. And even up to 600 stems per hectare in some of the nearly submontane altitudes. And some of the plots have been recording upwards of 20,000 stems per hectare, which is definitely a woodland in the making. So it's really encouraging. You still have to be patient with regeneration, and obviously keep observing things to make sure that there's not a pulse of overgrazing. But the initial signs are encouraging. But it's not all about trees. Of course, there's other grazing sensitive plants, and we're seeing a wonderful response too from our tall herbs. So yeah, melancholy thistle, globe flower, probably two of my most favourite species in the whole world. And we've got lots of them coming off the cliffs on Corrour down into the grasslands, regenerating as part of a lovely varied sward. And some of the other tall herbs, roseroot and geranium sylvaticum, there as well. It's these are really charismatic plants, and it's great to have them coming back more widely on the hill. But I mentioned mountain woodland in the introduction, so we'll come to that here because it's very close to my heart as the topic of my PhD. And it's fantastic being at Corrour as an opportunity to actually implement on the ground what I'm learning through my research, which also provides really good motivation to do the research really well, because I'm going to be using the outputs. Well, I am using the outputs now. So we've been carrying out mountain woodland restoration, which is a good case study where we're actually doing even more interventionist approach and doing some tree planting. So it's not just regeneration. Because some species are so sparsely spread across the estate, in so few numbers, that there's just not going to be any meaningful regeneration at scale unless we actually give them a helping hand. So it's the case for the montane willows. Two lovely species, Salix mercenites at the top, Whortle-leaved willow, and Salix laponum, Downy willow below, both Arctic alpine plants, occurring above 600 meters, and mostly in Scotland restricted to inaccessible cliff ledges because of overgrazing and very, very small fragmented populations. In some cases, some of these dots on the map is just an individual bush. So we've been helping them out by carrying out a scheme of supplementary planting, genetic rescue, basically helping to boost populations and join up the dots across the landscape in suitable places. And obviously I'm very keen on this because it's my PhD, but there are lots of benefits to mountain woodland restoration beyond just the actual trees themselves. They're great for upland biodiversity, supporting rare species of bird like ring-ouzel and really exciting invertebrate life, which could almost be a whole talk on its own. The butterflies and moths, and then also willows are fantastic for sawflies. So I think there's about 30 or so known sawflies that are entirely dependent, because they're host specific, so they're entirely dependent on the montane willows for their survival in Scotland. 30 species that we know of, but there's potentially more that we haven't found yet, or that we did have and we've already lost due to habitat loss. Very interesting. But as well as the biodiversity, mountain woodland is great for what are called nature-based solutions. So that's ways that they help to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So, for example, protecting steep slopes from erosion from landslides and rockfalls, and also providing, they slow the flow of water over and through upland soils, which has been shown to reduce the risk of downstream flooding, which is, of course, really important for mitigating the impacts of extreme weather events that we're seeing due to climate change. And I've wrote a paper about this, benefits of mountain woodland restoration. And actually, I should update this slide because I've also now published a whole paper reviewing montane willow scrub restoration in Scotland over the last 30 years, which is essentially the introduction to my PhD. But back to Corrour and what we've been doing. Mountain woodland is restoration, well, particularly the montane willow, is very involved because you're having to, like, these plants are inaccessible to large herbivores, so they're going to be inaccessible to me as well, pretty much. So it's involving getting up onto the cliffs and trying to get cuttings, because we don't have much viable seed on Corrour. So it's all about getting the cuttings. And then you've got each individual, the genetics are preserved. So I've been collecting cuttings from as many plants on Corrour as I can reach, with the long reach pruner, and then growing them on with Trees for Life in their nursery. And rather than just planting the cuttings out on the hill, we've been creating a seed stand at Corrour. So mixing all the cuttings from across Corrour, and they're planted just down near our office, and then they can produce vast quantities of seed there without us having to go back on the hill to keep getting things. And that was much easier to access. And we've already started planting out some. In the last couple of years, we've planted about 3,000 on the open hill, and this is all done without fencing, which is still quite high risk, or perceived to be high risk. Lots of projects use fencing, but inspired by some others who've been leading the way, like Mar Lodge in the Cairngorms, we thought we'd give it a go and see. But the monitoring is therefore really, really important. So I've got a cohort of, let me see, 480 of these Downy willow tagged from planting over the last 2 years. And I'm delighted that we've had a 98% survival rate after 2 years. And the browsing has actually been fine. I mean, there's a bit of browsing, right? But I'm not too worried about that as long as the plants can get away, because you might be expecting the deer to be using the willows to an extent. That's fine. So just as long as it's not over browsing. So it's going to be really interesting to follow these plants as they develop and hopefully mature and produce seeds themselves. But an encouraging start, and we'll continue to plant in small groups across the open hill in the years to come. I'm really fond of this slide because, well, it does feature montane willows, but also the people in the pictures. So these are some of our stalkers from Corrour. I think I mentioned about the employment enhancement, and I know there's not a lot of concern in the rural sector about if estates are switching from traditional sporting to environmental management, will we lose these sort of traditional roles and gamekeepers, stalkers, for example? Will there be fewer jobs for them? Well, actually, I would argue, and my colleagues would argue, that actually the opposite is true, because we need them more than ever. Because everything that they're doing for the deer management is completely underpinning my job. I mean, the conservation manager job is kind of pointless if we don't have the deer management delivering for that. So yeah, they're absolutely critical for that. But then also they've been really great helping me with the montane willow work, because there's nobody better to get to these difficult to reach places than the stalkers. And actually, Alan in particular, well, he's the one that found the coral necklace. Alan in the bottom right there, he actually often sends me records of montane willows that he's found in some really remote corners of the estate. So we're really lucky to have them, and I think it's really important to recognise the team's contribution to the environmental management and just how important that is. And yeah, we need to recruit more stalkers. Basically, we build in more housing to recruit them, because there's just such a need, and that's not going to change. So I've talked a lot about trees, so I'll move on to talking about peatland, because, well, as I said, Corrour, about a third of Corrour is blanket bog on the edge of Rannoch Moor, and peatland restoration is something that we've been taking again as it's very, very interventionist approach when you think about it. But there's quite a lot of degraded peatland on Corrour. So by that I mean bare peat hags, eroded gullies, basically lots of bare peat without vegetation on it, and dry as well, dry peat. And that's really bad because if the peat's not covered and wet, then the carbon dioxide starts getting lost either through runoff from the surface in the water or emitted into the atmosphere slowly, directly, and that's really bad for carbon dioxide emissions. So peatland, when it's really healthy, we know is great for sequestering carbon, but when it's unhealthy, it's terrible emissions. So even with the reduction in grazing pressure that we have, we don't think in many places that the peat hagging is so bad that the regeneration of the vegetation isn't going to happen quick enough on its own to keep pace with what we need to do in terms of carbon emissions. So that's why we're actively restoring it. We're not entirely certain exactly how the peatland ended up in this degraded state in Scotland. It's probably a combination of factors, well, overgrazing, stocking of animals, trampling particularly, rather than just the actual action of the grazing itself. Trampling and also burning and drainage as well of peatlands. And then once the peatlands have sort of started to degrade, I think there's an acceleration with climatic factors. So if they're very high altitude and exposed, then it's very, very hard for them to revegetate, due to the effect of wind and things. So we've been working in collaboration with Peatland Action to restore peatlands across Corrour at massive scale. This is about a third of my job, is just on peatland restoration, if not more than a third actually. So in yellow are the areas that we have worked with to restore, so 650 odd hectares. In green, well, that is actually being worked on currently, like as we speak, due to finish at the end of March. A large area up near Loch Nallat. Then we're hoping to work on the pink area in the next few years. And then we've still got all the rest of the brown to work on, including some massive areas down by the Blackwater on Rannoch Moor, which are going to be difficult to access because we've got to go over the railway or under the railway. But yeah, those figures there at the bottom, this is the total peatland. And well, nearly 6,000 hectares. And it's been calculated very, very broadly that if we were to restore all the peatland on Corrour, we could end up with an emissions abatement. So this is reducing the emissions from the degraded peatland. That would be an emissions reduction of 19,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year, which is pretty eye-watering and means we need to get on with this as quick as possible. If anything, I think actually that's probably a massive underestimate. I think the figures that we're getting refined from some of these areas that we've worked on, the emissions are even worse, that will have been even worse. So yeah, it's a big thing to do. And it involves working with machines on site. And there's various techniques that they use, but they will reprofile these eroding bare peat hags. So smooth off the edges and often recycle some of the material to put in peat dams, which slow the flow of water and then encourage rewetting. So the rewetting is really, really important for peat formation. And this is a before picture in Corrour. So this is quite high altitude. It's probably about 650, 700 meters. This area we restored in 2023. This picture was before, and then this is an after picture, like a matter of a couple of weeks after it was worked on. And the bare peat hags have gone, and there's this area of rewetting. That's it before. That's it after. I promise you it's about the same spot. I couldn't get into exactly the same spot because of the water, but pretty much. And this is Corrour, a bit more kind of like zoomed out. Before picture, complex peat hags, and then an after picture. Again, like just after the machines have moved off, so it's still kind of a bit rough around the edges. Some of the peat moved around and made into peat dams, but already some really lovely wetting. I'll go back again. Sometimes it's quite hard to retake these photos because the landscapes change so much. It's very dramatic. But it's not just about the carbon, actually. The peatland restoration is really great for biodiversity, as we've been finding out. And the invertebrate life in particular responds really, really quickly to these changes. In fact, so quickly, I don't question my life choices because montane willows will take decades to achieve what these dragonflies seem to do in a matter of months. Anyway, we've been working with the British Dragonfly Society, who are really keen on azure hawker because we've got, I think, one of the biggest populations in Britain. The azure hawker likes bog pools. And it's been suffering because of, well, probably climate change. It seems that the bog pools are drying out and populations under threat. So if we can look after the azure hawker, so like it's a really good indicator species, I think, of the health of our peatlands and their resilience in the face of climate change, changes in hydrology. So we've been working with the BDS. They helped us with a small scale project, sort of very akin to peatland restoration, but we just did this at the site very near to the azure hawker established population. So just working to create some new pools and also deepen pools to encourage refuge areas in case of drought. And this was done March 2023. We dug a sort of series of about 12 pools or so, and like within a few months, the azure hawker had already moved into a lot of these new pools. It's just really exciting. This is one of the sort of pools in action. And again, it does look quite interventionist when it's happening, but if you've got an experienced digger driver, they'll be very careful to make sure that there's no exposed peat left after the work's happened. And often they can actually do this work to actually, like peatland restoration, sort of cover over some areas of bare peat. So this was a lovely pool that was deepened and is now colonized successfully by azure hawker. Yeah, we've been finding larvae each year, and actually I had Stephen Cochrane, one of the BDS people, come and do a survey of azure, well, not specifically azure hawker, it wasn't supposed to be for him. He did an invertebrate survey at some of our peatland restoration sites. In fact, the site that I showed you those before after photos of, and then he found azure hawker there. So they may have been there present in very low numbers in some of the existing pools, but they've already started to colonize the peatland restoration pools at both of the sites that we've restored in the last couple of years. So that's very exciting. And I'm sure there's a lot more in terms of invertebrate life happening in those pools than just azure hawker. So speaking of biological recording, I think it's really nice to have a series of slides, celebrating some really exciting field trips that we've had at Corrour in the last few years. Like biological recording is so important for what we do because it's really difficult to do environmental management if you don't know what's there, or if you don't know what you've got, or if you're missing something really rare and exciting or a really cool indicator species. And to find populations of rare species scattered across the estate. So I feel like the biological recording has underpinned a lot of our decisions. And we're fortunate that the BSBI have made a couple of trips to Corrour. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten when the first one is. I'm sure Jim could tell us, like 2004 or something. It was way before my time. There was a field trip to Corrour for a week. And then we were really lucky. The BSBI came back in 2022 for a week and stayed in our holiday cottages in return for records. And also I got to join them as well, which was fantastic because I feel like I'm still learning. plant ID and botany skills. So it's just a great opportunity to get out and look for really exciting things. And then, well, we've also had in 2023, the British Biological Society came out and did very much a similar thing as well. So here's some slides. Just well, it's really difficult to pick because there were so many exciting things found, but just a few of my favourites. So this is from the BSBI's trip. A few of us, so it was Ian Strawn and myself, Georgia Hancock and Lewis Donaghy, had a day during that week on Ben Avon, which is our highest Monroe and Corrour, 1,102 meters, and recording some really cool Arctic alpine plants, something I'm really excited by. And so yeah, Cerastium nigrescens, Arctic mouse-ear and Phleum alpinum, Veronica alpina, we were all trying to sort of refine old records. I think the Phleum was actually a brand new record for Corrour, and I was really excited to see Veronica alpina because I'd never seen it before I came to Corrour, because it's one thing that doesn't occur on Ben Lawes. And one of the other days we went out, had a trip along Loch Traig to access some of the more remote hillsides, and Jim's team found lots of Salix mercenites, which we didn't know about. So that's been really helpful, taking cuttings from some of these plants since. And some other really cool things, Juncus castaneus, chestnut rush, and Chris Miles' team found Alchemilla glomerulans, which was new to Corrour. And really helpful to have the expertise on the identification of that one, because I'm still not sure I'd be entirely confident. So it was really, really, really helpful. And there's a familiar face. Ro was part of the team, of course. So very grateful for everybody's help. What have we got here? Alpine Ladies Fern on Ben Avon. Russet sedge and the hawkweed, which I think I think that's an endemic to Britain. So it's always really nice to have endemics on your estate. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone who attended the VSBI's trips. And then here's a slide from the BBS. I attended for a few days. I have to say I was quite overwhelmed because I'm not as confident with bryophytes as I am upland vascular plants, but it was incredible what was found. There was lots of nationally rare, nationally scarce species found that were new to Corrour. I think everybody was particularly excited about Grimmia anomala on the rocks of one of the high altitude lochs. I always love seeing Sphagnum osvinii because I feel like it's a really good indicator of sort of lovely top quality blanket bog. I'm told the Hermatocolis is a Schedule 8 protected species, so that was new to Corrour, and Polioscotica, which is another endemic. So yeah, I feel like Corrour is really, really good for its bryophytes, and there's probably even more to be found. The BBS were really complimentary of our management, actually, because I feel like biologists understandably sometimes get very worried when grazing is completely excluded or really, really reduced, because these plants sometimes get shaded out, out-competed when vegetation becomes really rank. So they were very pleased. They thought we'd got quite a good balance with our grazing management, keeping some nice open habitats for some of the bryophytes. So that was really good feedback. But of course, not just about plants. And we're fortunate because we've got Ian as Vice County Recorder for the BSBI, but is also, absolutely incredible entomologist. And he does work with us as a contractor. But also comes out in his free time and doing lots of recording of invertebrates as well with a team of entomologists, and setting up malaise traps, emergence traps, and various traps at high altitude. And they came in 2023 for a field trip with the Malach Society, which found all sorts of cool things. yeah, I guess quite overwhelming because I'm not an entomologist, but it's absolutely fascinating. It's just a few highlights. Let me see the top left. That's a pine borer, a ribbed pine borer. I'm told, and it's nationally scarce, and was found in Corrour Forest. And we've got some nationally scarce stonefly in the bottom left, and lacewing on the bottom right, and then there's the montane diptera on the top right. That one apparently is a very good species as an indicator of climate change effects. So it might be good, to keep an eye on that one and see how it fares in the future. And I'm told from their field meeting that they found a female fungal gnat on the frame of the cottage where everybody was staying in, and apparently they think that one's new to science. So that was amazing. Very funny that it was actually on the cottage as well. Okay, so I'm going to finish off with some science monitoring chat. So pulling back to talking about our data collection, because our management is very response led, so very much like looking at what's happening on the ground and basing our decisions off that. And so the monitoring is really, really important for underpinning what we're doing. So all the data that we're collecting on the environmental management is put into these ecosystem health indicator categories as a way of tracking our progress over time towards our targets and aspiration in ecological recovery. So the categories, extent of native woodland on former open hill areas, so that's tree regeneration. Then we've got the condition of other open hill habitats, particularly peatlands. Corrour Forest, I've not mentioned that at all, but that gets its own special category. Corrour Forest to the north of the estate was a former Forestry Commission plantation that's now being restructured over time to native woodland and peatland restoration as well. And my colleague John Sutherland manages Corrour Forest, which is a very, very interesting place from a management perspective. The health of the freshwater environment, and then health of keystone and indicator species. But I feel like we actually need number 6, which will go in the middle of this donut, which will be actually to do with people. So I guess social, social economic community benefits, for example, and employment enhancement. So we need to have some help from some social scientists to develop monitoring of that. And I'll come back. Sorry, the map. I always like to say I've got this map here with all the data, like collection points and polygons and things for the EHIs. Just the core EHIs. I mean, there's like far more data than actually is on this map. But even so, this sort of shows what we're doing, and it's very difficult to read. But that's kind of the point, because it just shows how much we've got going on across the estate. And then all the data gets fed into our ecosystem health dashboard, which is just the key highlights from the monitoring. So it's my job to pull out the main data, looking at trends over time as the kind of top highlights to present to the board and the family who own Corrour every year, to show how our progress is going. But we've got far more than is just here in various spreadsheets and reports. But these are the top highlights, showing progress over time and various different monitoring, with infographics on the left-hand side, just as a guide to what's going on. These are just the top 2 categories as an example. And it's really fun, part of my job. Originally, I kind of thought this would just be a sort of data visualization exercise. But actually, for me, it's really useful as well, because every year I'm updating these charts, updating these data, collating it all, and it's a really helpful way of keeping track. So hopefully, for example, if there was a pulse of browsing, a really like large pulse of browsing that was detrimental to the tree growth in our regeneration plots, then we would hopefully pick that up and be able to react really quickly. So that's the general idea. And yeah, it's been really, really encouraging. Well, particularly last year, 2024, we looked at our herbivore impact assessment, and big change in the right direction from 2018. And pulling out one example from the freshwater monitoring, because I like this as a kind of just contrast to talking about plants. And this has been fascinating for me as a botanist to see Ian's work, because you can get these indices of water quality from kick sampling. So the different taxa are weighted depending on whether they indicate poor, excellent water quality. And then Ian's able to calculate these indices of water quality. And I find it fascinating and really good news. This is from Corrour Forest, and seeing like moving from kind of okay to excellent in a few years. And this is in response to restructuring of the forestry plantation and peatland restoration, for example. So it's a very nice example of the EHIs in action. So just the last few slides on scientific research, but we could nearly already have an entire presentation just on that. So maybe that's something for another time. But being that I'm doing a part-time PhD, like this is one of the really exciting parts of my job, is actually doing research as well as implementing nature recovery on the ground. And we've already got lots of research happening at Corrour. Well, the top left photo there, that's dwarf birch for a planting trial for my PhD, which I'm due to finish in early 2026. So I've got about a year left, and I'm furiously writing already. So it's going really well, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I've got some really exciting results. We've also got a weather station with Dundee, Andrew Black, hydrologist there. We've got a live interface on the internet, which gives weather readings every 15 minutes, and all that data is being logged. So hopefully, if there's changes in the environmental monitoring, we can then account for changes in climate as well as changes due to our management through these weather data. We've got a PhD student with Stirling, another one, Ben Wilson, looking at multifunctional forestry. So he's working particularly in Corrour Forest and Lochosian Woods. And we've just had a new student start in September, Rory Abernethy, looking at Sitka spruce colonisation at the tree line. So that's going to be really interesting to see the effects of that through his research in the next few years. And when this slide is a nod to projects that we've currently got advertised or recruiting students for. Hopefully a project on mountain birch, trying to understand the genetics and morphology of mountain birch, and whether it's actually its own thing or not, or just downy birch at high altitude. And that will inform potential restoration work at higher altitude. We've got a riverwoods restoration project hoping to start soon, and some research to go along with that, and some projects looking at remote sensing using drones and satellite imagery from peatland restoration outputs, and really cool project hopefully that will get funded on montane mosaics and climate change with University of St Andrews, which moves me on just final to mention that because people may have heard of this in the news, and through various pipelines, that we've now got a research partnership up and running with St Andrews University, which is so exciting. Although let me say it's not exclusive relationships, so we'll still be working with other universities as well. In the spirit of collaboration, but this partnership with St Andrews has come about through a natural capital transaction, primarily from the peatland restoration, to offset their unavoidable international student travel, and we're reinvesting that money back into employment enhancement research, and we'll be building a research station on Corrour So it's just very early days of the partnership. It's only a few months in, but we're really, really excited by what this could achieve in the future. And yeah, hopefully sort of demonstrating wider benefits from nature recovery by sort of putting that back in to employment and the local community and research. So I'm really excited to see what research projects come out of this, and yeah, hopefully hosting field trips, and we'll be able to host more folk on Corrour in our research station accommodation, which will have a lab in it as well. So that might be useful for visiting botany, entomology groups in the future, because it won't be exclusive to St Andrews, so we can use it for other opportunities as well. So yeah, watch this space. It's really exciting because we're very much sustainability is core to Corrour, and we didn't want to enter into any partnership over natural capital with anybody unless they had top quality credentials in sustainability and decarbonisation. And fortunately, St Andrews were able to prove that, while also being a renowned research institution that can hopefully help Corrour in our journey for ecological restoration. So yeah, lots of exciting things to come. So that's the end of the talk. And yeah, I'd be really, really excited to take questions.
Thanks very much. Sara, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed seeing the slides. I've been to Corrour Estate, I don't know, 10, 20 times at least, but not since it's been taken, I think only once since it's been taken over by the new owner. So I'd love to go back and just see some of the changes. But anyway, open to the group. If there are questions people would like to ask, just fire ahead.
Can I ask if there was any news on the proposed mobile phone masts that are planned all over the place, including on Corrour?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. I think you've asked that. I think you heard my talk in various guises and several times over the years, and might have asked the same question on the Loch Arbor Natural History Society group. But it's a really good question because it allows me to actually talk about that. Yeah, so I don't know if people know about the Shared Rural Network, which was this government scheme to have large, I don't know, like 98% coverage of the country with 4G, which is, yeah, I mean, you can see on paper that might be a nice idea, but then ends up with masts being proposed all over Corrour. So, and other, wonderful places of natural heritage and beauty in the Cairngorms, for example. So we had, I think, about 7 proposed on the estate. So we were strongly opposed to them, like not in the scheme in principle, because if there's places where these are actually genuinely needed by local communities, then that's fine. But in Corrour's sense, it's just a complete waste of money because it's not going to be servicing many people that live there, and actually the mobile reception is already quite good, unless you're right in some of the valleys. So if you're on the tops, you get full signal anyway. So we were worried about the ecological impacts and also, of course, the visual impacts, and the fact that helicopters would have to come and refuel these things quite regularly if they couldn't access them by vehicle and all this. So we were encouraging people to object, and local people have been. And I know a couple of them have already been completely thrown out. So that's a good start. Hopefully set a precedent for some of the other ones. There was one proposed on the ridge of one of the Corbetts next to the station at high altitude, and it's just completely, from my point of view, unpractical. So that one I think was completely thrown out. So yeah, we'll see. There's still others being proposed, but I think we're quite hopeful that none of them will end up going ahead.
Let's hope not. I objected to quite a few of them, but
yeah, thank you.
Can I ask Sara, Duncan Donald here, can I ask about how the neighbours feel about you shooting so many deer? I mean, it's what we need to do, but usually the first thing that happens is that everybody else complains. Do you have active working groups with neighbours?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, it's a really good one. Well, I mean, I've only been at Crow 4 years, so I've not had the same experience of some of my colleagues. So our estate manager, Donald's been at Crow over 18 years. And I mean, I think things were different in the past when we started on this road. There was, I guess, understandably, yeah, some objection and different opinions from other neighbouring estates who had very different objectives. So yeah, I think deer management groups had been quite difficult. But over time, it's definitely changing, and I feel that since I've been at Corrour, it's generally like interactions are quite positive or very constructive. Anyway, and we've had groups visit, including local landowners, come to visit Corrour. We've shown them around, and it's all been very positive. And yeah, so it feels like things are definitely moving in the right direction. I mean, the Scottish Government targets are to reduce deer densities down to 10 per square kilometre anyway, which is getting towards what we've got at Corrour. But then local estates, well, there's still a bit of a mix, but we've got... I should have put a slide about this actually in the presentation. There's a partnership that Corrour is part of called Lochaber Moor. So it's been up and running nearly a year now, but it's kind of our equivalent of Cairngorms Connect. So yeah, sort of landowners from across Lochaber with shared vision getting together for nature recovery, basically. So that's a really useful opportunity for us to speak to some of our neighbours who are interested in doing things similar to us. And yeah, we're hopeful that others will kind of join on a similar trajectory in the future. So I think it feels like things are changing, and there's definitely less friction and conflict than there was in the past.
I've come in with a question about. I mean, it's really interesting, having been on a couple of the botanical trips there with the BSBI, to see all the other work that's going on as well, and to see the amount of monitoring and keeping track of what all's going on that you're doing. And I'm intrigued by your environmental health indicators dashboard. And how did you derive that? I mean, presumably you can't just go out and buy some software that'll give you a environmental health indicators dashboard. Did you have to commission somebody to come up with the software, or how was it done?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, it was really sort of the brainchild of our environmental committee. Well, our idea was to sort of have somewhere to showcase the key exciting data. So it was actually my brief, like pretty much the first day I arrived at Corrour, I was like, can you make a dashboard, please?
Oh, just like that.
To like collate all the data, which was really fun actually to kind of for me to get to know Corrour in detail. And so I actually worked on all these charts just in Microsoft Excel. Now through my PhD, I do coding with R Studio, if anyone's heard of it. But Corrour, we still use Excel because it's fine and it's set up really well for like inputting new data and things. So I've just kept with that. So I made the charts in Excel, and then did the mock-up in PowerPoint. And we had a kind of chat about the design and the color schemes and things and what we wanted to include. And then for the final like polish, we did use a graphic designer who kind of made it look fancy in a way that you can do better in some other software than just in PowerPoint. But that, yeah, like he put the sort of background in with the different photos and things, and helped with the infographics. So every year I just like supply the new information and it gets updated. Might be nice to have something live on our website as well, but yeah,
that'd be amazing. Yeah, the whole thing looked very impressive, to say.
Have you got particular aims for this year coming, things you particularly want to see achieve or start on the estate?
Yeah, well, always peatland restoration. We want to start on our new area down near Rannochmore in the autumn. But well, we're hoping to do a riverwoods project on the River Ossian, which is the river that flows from Loch Ossian northwards to Glen Spean, and it would create a really nice corridor from Loch Ossian to Corrour Forest. The monitoring is just showing that the regeneration isn't getting away that quickly in there because there's not a large amount of seed source in that kind of open valley. So we feel that it could do with just a bit of helping hand with some kind of supplementary planting, and then also riparian woodland restoration seems to be the craze at the moment, and also putting in large woody structures, which are sort of felled trees that just create just sort of more dynamic conditions and shelter and things for fish and invertebrates. So we're going to be doing that. That's actually in collaboration with Loch Arbor Moor, the partnership I mentioned, who are helping to sort of manage that. So that's going to be really interesting. I think that's my main new project next year. Carrying on with the montane willows and carrying on with the tall herb monitoring. That's the 4-year. Every 4 years we're doing that, so we're repeating that this year. So hoping to see that they're doing okay on the open hill.
So you're not going to be sitting on the couch, it doesn't sound like, with all of those tasks. Yeah,
and now with the research partnership, and we might have quite a few PhD students next year. So yeah, it's a lot to squeeze into 3 days a week.
When is your new research station going to take bookings?
Oh, well, I'm told that we might be aiming for opening in spring 2026. So
quite soon.
I mean, I've seen like architects' designs and things. So I think it will all be down to sort of contractors and things to actually be able to do the work and contractor availability, but we'll see. It's great because it's one of the challenges actually, Corrour, is the accommodation constraints, and as we have more people working on the estate, so this will hopefully be a game changer for us to be able to host large groups. It should have a capacity of about 20, I think. So yeah, can't wait.
Would you like another visit of botanists?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that would be fantastic.
I'll see what I can do.
Any more questions for Sara or comments people want to make?
I was quite interested in who are the people that sort of invest all this money because in buying the estate, because presumably until they'd got the hydro set up and everything, it was just pumping money in before they got any return.
So private estate by family with Swedish connections. I'm not really supposed to say very much, but it's probably quite easy to Google. But yeah, the private family with actually big connections to nature restoration globally as well through philanthropy. So Corrour is actually just a small part of a much bigger network, which is really cool to be part of. Yeah, so we're very lucky that they had the kind of vision and dream, quite pioneering actually in Scotland, really. And obviously Glenfeshie is quite famous, and Mark Lodge was bought at the same time. So we're very lucky. They kind of, I think it was very much hand to mouth to begin with. I mean, sports shooting doesn't really make that much money. It's not really that viable in Scotland anyway. And in fact, we feel that probably folk are undercharging for that. So yeah, the hydro was a big investment for us to then kind of be self-sufficient off that. So yeah, we're very fortunate because we do get, when we have other groups coming, even like local landowners, local managers, and the question we always get asked, like they're always like, well, we'd love to do this, we'd love to do nature restoration, but how do you pay for it? And it's really important to address that, because that, you can't do it otherwise. So the hydro has been what's supporting us, and then now with the natural capital as well, hopefully demonstrating that these are opportunities potentially for other estates as well to deliver for the environment.
Oh, can I just say what a fascinating talk it was, Sarah? Really enjoyed it. And you're obviously such an enthusiast, not only for your, the work you're doing, but the whole estate. And it looks absolutely, fabulous area. I was really interested in how quickly the bog pools were developing once you were doing the peatland management, and how quickly you're getting evidence of the invertebrates. Is there also evidence of recolonization by plants as well, the sort of plants you'd get in a bog pool?
Yeah, we're lucky because in contrast, like some peatland restorations, particularly in England, they've like lost basically all their sphagnum, so we don't have to do any sphagnum like transplants or propagation or anything. It just seems to be finding its way into the pool. So it's interesting. Some of the sites were restored about 3-4 years ago, and you can see these big blooms of sphagnum moss. I guess most of it's sphagnum cuspidatum in the middle of the pools anyway, just blooming out. So that seems to have happened really, really quickly. It's but I think it would be really important to monitor that, the revegetation as well. Cotton grass seems really, really important for that. We've got various monitoring plots at the vegetation of the peatland restoration sites, but it's actually quite hard to like set that up, because you're either like you've got bare peat and then the machines move in and everything's just completely transformed. So you almost can't do it like before plot. So often our monitoring is after we set it up afterwards, and then in some of the areas where they've put donor turfs and things to revegetate, to sort of just check that the donor vegetation is actually like taking hold and surviving, and things aren't regressing back the way.
I think that was one of the most impressive things, is seeing the restored peatland, and having walked over those hills and seen the huge amount of peat hags, just to see something's happening to kind of rescue the environment there. Is there anyone else? Yeah.
It's amazing, like it happens so quickly, like basically instantly.
I'll have to come back and look. Anyone else got anything they want to say or ask?
I was wondering if you have any view about the consequences of climate change, because there are some areas where there's already concern that plants are disappearing off the top of mountains with warming summers and warming winters. So how does that interact with restoration, which people can mistake thinking it's trying to hark back to the past, I suppose? A rather different future coming, don't we?
So of course, like very close to my heart. When I worked at Ben Lawes, I was monitoring some of the rarest Arctic alpines in the country. My particular favourite being snow pearlwort, which doesn't occur anywhere else. And we published a paper on that, riding the elevator to extinction, showing, like, it was quite depressing, really, actually, showing the declines in the sort of highest altitude plants, that the lower populations were all going extinct and the range was contracting uphill. So I've always got that in the back of my mind. I mean, Corrour doesn't have quite the same flora as Ben Lawes. Nowhere else does. It's very special, but we still do have like pretty good Arctic alpines, some good calcareous species, and there is concern about them, and not just the vascular plants. I got commissioned a snowbed survey, so we had Oliver Moore come out a few years ago and put in some snowbed plots looking at those bryophytes, that we felt that there were already changes happening, and it would have been nice to have put them in 20 years ago. There's lots of Discampsia and Nardus coming in. So yeah, it's difficult because there's little I can do, in a sense. It's the one challenging part of my job, to help some of these species if it's climate change, and if there's, I guess, interactions with nitrogen deposition as well, which makes things challenging. So yeah, we've just got to, I guess, monitor them and yeah, think if there's anything that we can do, like supplementary planting or translocations. I mean, Corrour could be a site to do translocations of some plants that might be declining elsewhere. I mean, I don't know, something like Phyllodoce, who knows? That's just a few kilometres off our march. Though it's got very specific requirements. So translocations are very hard. But the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh have got a good programme of that. And Corrour's got an interesting history of experimental planting of various forestry things and like just doing unusual things, giving unusual things a go. And we don't have any terrestrial conservation designations, so we could try some things if we feel it's appropriate. But I don't know. I yeah, it's difficult. But it's definite justification for doing the habitat restoration work like we've been doing with the montane willows, for example, the supplementary planting of that, because it provides benefits more widely. Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum.
Has anyone ever tried making sure there are some representatives of endangered species on the north side of mountains? Because presumably the north sides are cooler, and therefore there might be potential for a longer survival.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with woolly willow, because that's the rarest montane willow, and there's good populations just off Corrour on the Ben Alder range. And I did wonder, oh, maybe we could do some of that, because it's well known to be associated with north-facing corries. But the one north-facing corrie that looked good on the map, when we went there, I just didn't get the feel for it, and the geology wasn't right, and I just felt like it wouldn't be appropriate. So yes, complicated. It's not just about aspect, but the geology can play a big part. And that's why we've been focusing on the Downy willow and the Whortle-leaved willow that we do have already, that are a bit less fussy. And then we can sort of just work on boosting our own populations, rather than the woolly willow. So yeah, there's a good yeah, it's interesting to think about these decisions, and what the right choices are.
Thanks.
Just a very quick one. Has any work actually been done on core sampling around the peat areas, particularly where you've got the peat hags? We're always hearing these days of the amount of seeds that lay dormant, and you're trying to work, you're discovering various things coming back on their own. It'd be interesting to see if you could get some core samples done and analyse what is actually laying there.
Yeah, we have actually asked. Thanks for mentioning that, because I can mention St Andrews again. For the student Kaylee Leatherbarrow, who's doing a PhD actually with St Andrews and has collected some peat cores from our peat bogs, and actually they collected like samples of wood from some of the old pine stumps in the bogs as well. And then you can do radiocarbon dating and dendrochronology study to look at the ages. And I think she's getting some really, really interesting results, looking at the composition of species and the age of some of these pine trees and things on Corrour, and contrasting that with some sites in the Cairngorms. So yeah, it's something we're hoping to do a lot more of, because we've got really valuable peatland resource on Corrour. Although it's quite interesting actually, because doing peatland restoration can potentially like damage these records. So I've been working with Althea Davis at St Andrews, who's a paleoecologist, to think of ways that we can like make sure we don't destroy our peatland, for the best of intention, destroy the peat records, to make sure that paleoecologists can come in and sample if there's anything that is worth collecting before the machines move in. So yeah, an interesting conundrum as an ecologist, to make sure I don't inadvertently destroy someone's potential research project in the future.
From what you said, it sounds like as long as you core before doing massive sort of earth movements, you shouldn't actually destroy very much at all. You're only moving, not removing.
Yeah, it's a challenge when it's it's like redistributed, and then you don't know what's what. But obviously, not all the peat is moved in a peatland restoration sites. There's still plenty of places that are completely untouched by the machines. So yeah.
I think maybe we should call it a night. You've had a lot of questions and a lot of talk from us. That was a tremendously interesting talk, Sarah, and great photos as well. It really gives us a sense of the estate and what you're doing and how things have been changing, and hopefully will continue to change and improve in the future. So thanks very much for giving up your time and tonight to come and talk to us. I think everyone will have enjoyed it as much as myself.
Thanks very much. It's really nice to like chat and have a really nice, enthusiastic group such as ourselves. Ask really good questions. It always, makes me think about the work in sometimes different ways from different people's perspectives, and just, it's sort of nice, to remind me like why I do what I do, and share it with other people. So thanks very much for the invite.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.